Hello, welcome to Postcolonial Space. I'm Masood Raja, and today I want to talk about one of the most significant practices that guides my life, but that I also consider is important in this age of texting, internet, Facebook, and Twitter, and that is kindness. Now, if you came to my office and looked at my computer, right at the bottom of my computer, I have these two words: be kind. Why did I put those words there? Well, I realized that while in my interactions, face-to-face interactions with human beings, I try to be kind and generous, right? But I realized that most of the times when I respond unkindly to people is when I'm interacting with them through email, through Facebook or Twitter. And since I use my computer to do all those things, I put this reminder there so that if I get an email which somehow has something that either offends me or which, kind of makes me angry, in writing my response to it, I should still adhere to my principle of kindness. And it's important to remember that. Now, the world that we live in is a world that moves at a really fast pace, right? It's an unequal world. It's an unjust world. It's a world of great possibilities, but also of huge suffering and inequalities. So one option that we have in this world is to just follow the status quo and internalize whatever privilege we might have and then impugn on to all the others who may not be as privileged as us their failures, right? And that's one way of looking at the world. And maybe we can live our lives in that mode of thinking as well. But another way of life, which I try to teach in my classes, is to look at the world outside and ask yourself, is this the kind of world that I want to live in? And if it is not, what can I do to change it? Now, you, me, and so many of us who live in this world, we don't have the kind of power to transform the world, right? The only power we have is on the words that we use, right? And on the actions that we perform in the world. And that brings us to this point where when we interact with people, especially through these technological media, is where we should practice that. And practice is in a way that even if someone is being offensive or rude or mean to us, in our response to them, we should not let the gut defensive instinct to drive our response. It should still come from a place of generosity, right? From a place of forgiveness. And that's what I mean by kindness, right? A few years ago when I was talking to someone who was deeply religious, and this person asked me, if you don't practice formal religion, what becomes your moral compass? How do you decide whether a thing is right or wrong? And I told that person that, simply because I don't follow a formal religion doesn't mean that I'm not spiritual. But secondly, I let kindness guide my life. And then this person asked me aptly, how do you define kindness? And that set me thinking. Because someone else's idea of kindness could be different, but as I thought more about it, I realized that by and large, by kindness, all we mean is that we always foreground the feelings, thoughts, and needs of the other before our own, right? And that in responding to people, we might attempt to think that if they are behaving a certain way, let's not capture them in that moment. That's probably not who they are. What are the existential circumstances that have made them to say a thing that they have said. If someone slights me through an email, could it be because they didn't know how to address me, or how to ask a question, or how to tone a question, right? By doing that, then we can still allow our rational self, right, our generous self, to respond to things that we would otherwise find offensive. And I find that that practice helps me to become, a better person in terms of interacting with other people. Another thing that involves being kind is to never be afraid to apologize, right? If you have said something or done something that has hurt someone else or offended someone else, even before they point it out, just let's apologize to them. And there are biological and physical reasons for it. If we are thinking conscious beings and we know that we have wronged someone, our body literally is in an anxious state. And it only gets back to normal when we actually either do something that we can call good, or actually talk to the person and apologize to them. Try that sometimes. So kindness isn't just that it makes other people's lives better, it actually enables you to live a healthier and better life. Now, when I teach, how do I encourage this practice in my students? Of course, first by practicing it myself as a teacher without compromising the standards, but at least by letting my students know that I'll be there, that I'm available, and I will make time for them, that I care about their existential circumstances and don't think that everything fits all, right? But more importantly, as we are reading literary texts in our classes, I encourage them to pose 2 questions to the text, right? When they read it. And they obviously feel a certain way when they read a text, and they think a certain way when they read a text. So I ask them to ask these 2 questions. Why do I think the way I think? And why do I feel the way I feel? My hope is that if they start questioning that, then they would know what is it in a text that either offends them or makes them happy, and where does it place them as human beings, Or what is it in the text that they think is right and wrong, and then it makes them question their own sense of right and wrong. So overall, this simple principle of being kind and generous personally has helped me in becoming a better person, right? Or at least in becoming a kind of person that I myself can live with, right? But in terms of my practices as a teacher, as a scholar, as a human being in the world, it enables me to constantly look at my own responses to the world, to people on the internet, on the phone, and ask myself this question as to what I am about to do or say, what are the consequences of saying that for the other person, right? And I didn't have to get a PhD to learn these things. All of us, our first training ground is always the family. And my siblings and I, we were lucky that our mother instilled these things in us. And I think this is the most important thing that we can teach our children and our students, that kindness and a generosity of spirit doesn't only help others, but that it also enables us to feel better, to live a better life. And that kindness and generosity shouldn't be what Paulo Freire calls false generosity. It shouldn't be to show that we are generous. It shouldn't be to show that we are kind. We should genuinely mean it. And within that, we can work according to our material, symbolic, emotional limits. But for as long as we are approaching life and others with a sense of kindness and a sense of generosity, I think on a smaller micro scale, we can become part of the larger change that we need in this grand culture in which so many times we all feel so powerless and, so weak. So that's what I would like to say about the significance of kindness in my life, but how it can enrich your life if you adopt it as a moral principle or as a way of life. Thank you so much for joining me. Be kind, and I will see you next time. Peace and love.